Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back. We had taken a little bit of a break from 2 Kings because of Easter and then having Miss Haley teach last week. So we're going to jump back into 2 Kings chapter 8. And good try, Peter. Peter's trying. And we've just got a couple random little stories to hit here as we go in chapter 8. So we're going to cover verses 1 through 6 is the first story in 2 Kings chapter 8. It says, Then spake Elisha unto the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, Arise, and go thou and thine household, and sojourn wheresoever thou canst sojourn. For the Lord hath called for a famine, and it shall also come upon the land 7 years. Peter's got it right. I was going to ask you guys what a famine is, and Peter reminded us they weren't going to have any food, or food was going to be very scarce in the land. So Elisha comes along and he's like, you need to go somewhere else. You need to live somewhere else because there's not going to be food here. Take your household and go somewhere else. When I was reading through this, I was thinking about how God is still taking care of this lady. She obeyed way back when, and God is still taking care of her. Now, we don't know the whole story as far as the Bible doesn't give us every detail of her life. I'm sure she obeyed more than just that once, but I thought it was kind of neat to see how God is still taking care of her. Sometimes God changes the circumstances where we are. When we learned about her before and God fed her and her son in the circumstances where they were. Well, this time the lady is told to leave, to go somewhere else to be fed instead of the oil being just replenished or the meal. So I thought that was kind of an interesting contrast too. But let's see if she obeys, which you probably guess she did. Verse 2, And the woman arose and did after the saying of the man of God. And she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. So she leaves her homeland, she goes to the Philistines, and she lives there for 7 years, where God continues to take care of her and her family, continues to take care of her household. She did what God wanted, and God provided for her. God took care of her. Well, when she left, it was kind of like giving up right to her house and to her land. So when the famine ends and she comes back, she doesn't have a house and a land to go to. And their culture and society was different than ours, boys and girls. So it's a little bit hard to relate, but she's desperate. She doesn't have anywhere to take her family back to. So who does she go to but to the king? Verse 3, And it came to pass at the 7 years' end that the woman returned out of the land of the Philistines, and she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and for her land. She goes to the king, she's like, I need my land back, I need my house back, I need your help. Boys and girls, if we obey God, is God going to be like, oh, too bad, so sad, you lost out on your land? No, boys and girls, she obeyed God, and God's going to take care of her. Sometimes we think if we do what's right or we obey God, we're going to get the short end of the deal or the short straw. But boys and girls, serving God is always worth it. God always takes care of his children. He takes care of those who obey him. If you obey him, you're not going to get gypped, okay? Serving God is so much better than all the world has to offer. Well, at this time, verse 4, And the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Tell me, I pray thee, all the great things that Elisha had done. So the king's like, hey, wait a minute, I've heard of this guy Elisha. Can you just tell me about some things that he did? And so Gehazi starts to tell him, wow, Elisha did this with God's power, and he did this with God's power. And he says, hey, and he rose this boy from the dead who had died, and it's him. It's the boy who's right here, this lady who's asking for her house and land back. Her son right here is the one who was dead, and Elisha raised from the dead. We find that in verse 5, And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life cried to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life. Well, Elisha's testimony was great, boys and girls. Elisha had a reputation, which we're going to see next week as well. Elisha had a reputation that when the king heard this, he honored the lady. Verse 6, and when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed unto her a certain officer, saying, restore all that was hers, and all the fruits of the field, since the day that she left the land, even until now. He says, give her back her house, give her back her land, and then basically the fruit of it, the harvest, all that has been reaped over the last 7 years. Now, it was a famine, but he said, go back for that 7 years and give her what is rightfully hers. God took care of the lady. He took care of her in warning her of the famine, having Elisha tell her to leave, giving her that warning, providing for her and her household during the famine, restoring her land and her house back to her, and giving her above and beyond with the restoring the harvest as well. God takes care of those who trust in him. Boys and girls, will you look to the Lord this week, or will you look to the world? The world sometimes, it offers us things that look pretty shiny and nice and pretty, but boys and girls, serving God is so much better. Doing what's right is so much better than what the world has to offer. Boys and girls, I hope this week you'll choose to obey, and you'll take some time to thank the Lord for all that he's given you, because boys and girls,